What's up, guys? We are here today. We're going to be looking at some rookie quarterbacks for the upcoming 2023 NFL Draft. And we're going to be looking at them through more of a dynasty outlook, fantasy outlook, and dynasty outlook for those. So as always, I'm joined by my dad. How you doing today?
What's up, everybody?
Yeah, we're go ahead.
Happy Thursday evening.
Thursday evening, yeah, March 2nd. I was going to mention that it's March 2nd, so we're just under 2 months away from the draft. So combine is starting. It started today, well, a couple days ago, I guess, but the real stuff is starting this weekend, today and this weekend. And so yeah, it's exciting times for us football addicts who, although it's only been less than a month since the Super Bowl, I'm already missing football. So it's pretty nice that with Dynasty fantasy, we have an excuse to talk about it all year long. So yeah, today we're going to be looking at just the consensus top 4 quarterbacks, which is Bryce Young, Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. Those are across the board the top 4 quarterbacks that are going to be taken in the draft, and I think all of them should be going in the first round, maybe even in the top 10 or 15 picks. Who knows? So yeah, we're going to kind of give our thoughts about each one, and then kind of talk about them from a dynasty point of view. So I guess my first question to you, Dad, is when you're looking at quarterbacks, is there anything in particular you look for? Is it, even watching football for a long time now, is it more of the feel thing, the eye test, or what is it for you?
Well, some of it, the way the quarterbacks are looked at nowadays, go back to the old days, it was guys standing in the pocket and throwing the ball and stuff like that. Now we got quarterbacks like, Lamar Jackson and Mahomes to a certain extent, and some of these other guys who run around and harder to catch, and Kyler Murray and things like that, so, it's nice. It's still nice to see that big, tall guy, 6'1", 6'2", 6'4", they were talking about Peyton Manning today, how big he really was, big man. That's, ideally you'd like to see that. Mm-hmm. Personally, I don't think the running part of quarterbacks, I think it's good for a few years, but guys are going to get they're going to get hit and they're going to get hurt. So that stuff kind of wears out. So that's the kind of quarterback that I'd like to see him be able to run around a little bit, just because you're a big guy, big strong guy, you can still move around, step up in the pocket, so yeah, but like Kyler Murray, man, the guy's very talented, but geez, you nail him a couple of times, he's gonna get hurt. And but somebody like Ben Roethlisberger, it was a big guy, but he could move around a little bit. So Phillip Rivers, he was a stick figure. He just stood there like cement in his shoes. So, but anyway, that's the kind of quarterback. But they're not coming out of college like that, Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I think there's a little more, things change just like everything in life, right? So, you're right. But at the same time, I think, we haven't seen a running type of quarterback yet to win a Super Bowl, right? I mean, we got close, I guess, with Jalen Hurts, but he was still doing it you still got to be able to do it from the pocket, ultimately, right? You still got to be able to throw the ball, whether you run or great at running like Lamar or Jalen or Kyler, you still got to be able to make the passes. That's kind of what it comes down to. But you're definitely right where, things are changing just like with everything. And which kind of brings us into our first guy that we're going to talk about. And definitely doesn't fit that mold that you were talking about with Bryce Young. I think I don't think there's a consensus number 1 here, but I think the majority of people would say that Bryce Young is probably the number 1 quarterback in the draft. So yeah, we kind of watched five-ish games. And what are your thoughts about Bryce Young when you kind of watched him? Again, we're not scouts or anything, and I always tell people like the quarterbacks are definitely the hardest thing to evaluate because there's just so much that goes into it, and scheme and the offense you're on, and your coordinators that you have in college, and the weapons you have, and all of these things. And so when it comes down to it, we really got to rely on NFL scouts a lot when it comes to trusting the NFL, basically.
We got to believe what Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and all these other clowns tell us. And
and just where they go in the draft too. Like
I heard a good thing today from that. Okay, we got 4 quarterbacks. Let's say they're going in the first round. They go one of them's gonna be good. Another one's gonna start, and the other 2 are gonna ended up being like Carson Wentz's or something like that.
You mean just like based on how it's played out in the past statistically and stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Like
you
but
very rarely get multiple superstars.
Bryce Young, he's the main, of course he played for Alabama, so he played in the best college conference, Southeastern Conference. Competition's tough there. Of course, his team is full of 5-star recruits and 5-star wide receivers and 5-star linemen and stuff like that. So, but the guy won the Heisman Trophy last year, and he took Alabama to the championship, and he looks the part. The problem is, is what we get told is, he doesn't have the measurables, so it just came out today that he's 5'10.5". That's pretty short. He's very slight, as we've mentioned before. That's not ideal, in today's world. But he can put the ball on target. I wouldn't say he's got a huge arm or anything like that, but I'd say, he knows how to play the position. He's mobile. I have seen him, running around in the backfields in some of the games, and so, he started for 2 years. I think it's about 25, 26 games he started, and some of the old school coaches used to mention, that they don't want to draft quarterback unless he's got like 40 starts or something, but nowadays I think 2 years is a good standard number.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of have similar thoughts about him when you were talking about, obviously he can move. He's almost like, he doesn't run a lot. They don't design runs for him, which is smart because like you said, he's small. But he's, in terms of fantasy output, he'll probably put up similar like Mahomes like rushing totals of 300-400 yards rushing or something, because he is mobile. He can kind of create with his feet, like we see with Mahomes. He just, the delay and run around, and doesn't have the biggest arm for sure. I agree with that, but it's good enough, right? But you'll watch some games where he'll throw some deep balls and he'll fall short and things like that. So he definitely doesn't have a cannon compared to a couple other guys on this, coming out in the draft. But yeah, he's really, really accurate. That was something I was really impressed with. It's just not even just accurate, but like precise. And if you go back and watch the games and just see where his receivers are catching it, they're literally catching it in stride, and they're just being able to get 20 more yards, 10 more yards. It seems like every catch almost, but they don't have to stop momentum and catch the ball, which, that's going to happen sometimes, but just to see the placement of like, you see the difference when you watch a Bryce Young, and some of these other guys are just, so precise with that ball. So
Some of it has to do, I believe, I agree with what you say there, but the receivers, it sure is nice to have all these top-notch guys who are probably, you know, they're all running kind of, I don't want to say wide open, but there's not we think of, was in Alabama last year. They had Mechie and Jamison Williams. The year
Mhm.
before that, they had who's the guy from Miami?
Waddle and Devontae
Yeah.
Smith.
So yeah, so some of that, but the quarterback, still has to put the ball there, and like you said, you got to hit him at the right point. Hit
Yeah,
him in stride, allow him to make the big plays, and
yeah,
um,
definitely. I think
so
this year, um, the receivers weren't as necessarily stand out as they have been the last several years. It was a little more of like Bryce Young kind of, and we kind of saw that reflected in this year's Alabama team. Wasn't like the normal Alabama teams. They lost 2-3 games this year, which is crazy for Alabama to lose more than one game. Seems like,
well,
and
they lost 2 games, but they were both on last second field goals.
mhm,
One was to LSU. They lost in overtime.
yep,
I don't think that was a last second field goal, but the Tennessee game, which was like a track meet, like 52-49, that was a last second field goal. So
mhm.
yeah, but
Yeah, I think
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just getting back to Bryce Young a little bit. I think he basically, to me, when I watch him, he basically has everything that you want in a quarterback. And the one thing, like if he was 2-3 inches taller or even 10, 15 pounds heavier, I don't think there would be no question he'd be the number one pick. Um,
I think
the
one of
height is one thing. Real quick, the height is one thing, and the weight is even more concerning. Where I think I heard that if he gets, when he gets drafted, it would be the first quarterback under 200 pounds since like Seneca Wallace in 2013 or something.
Jeez,
So it just
that's
doesn't
going way
happen.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. He and see, so he's not going to change his height.
no,
He's done, but he could definitely bulk up and stuff like that. So
hmm
we'll see. We'll see. These guys, they take a lot of punishment in the NFL, man, with really big and fast, strong guys coming in and wanting to kill you.
yeah, yeah, and I think I also heard that he was only hit 15 times last year. I think
What?
not
Really?
sacked or anything. Yeah, like he was, or maybe he was only tackled 15 times. He might have been hit more, but he was only tackled 15 times last year, and he got hurt on one of those, hurt his shoulder,
He did
right?
get hurt. Yes.
Yeah, so he missed. He only missed, I think, a game and a half, or he didn't miss multiple games, but still, like he wasn't hit that much. He was under pressure quite a lot. Just real quick, I think some interesting, a little more advanced stats. He was pressured on over 33% of his dropbacks, which is pretty high, I'd say, especially for Alabama. You would think that would be lower because I think
Yeah.
all their offensive linemen are going to be playing in the NFL. Um, adjusted completion, though, adjusted completion just means that it takes out dropped passes from receivers and also balls that are thrown away. It's almost over 77% is adjusted completion. And and he doesn't get sacked even though he was under pressure 33% of the time. He was only sacked on over 12.5% of those.
Yeah, I have that he was sacked 18 times, but if you look at the
Okay.
game log, there was, he got sacked once here, and
Mhm.
geez, who's this team? Austin Pay
Yeah, yeah.
sacked him 3 times.
And
Jeez,
they're
that's kind of weird.
yeah, it is. That's one of their like first games of the year. Maybe at the end, before the SEC championship game, they always play a cupcake or something. Um, Yeah, I think 18. That sounds like that's a lot for college, and especially for an Alabama. That's not the normal Alabama number you think you would hear. So, but yeah, I think we'll get to how we rank them at the end. But I was pretty impressed. I obviously watched some Alabama games, but the precision of his passes is what impressed me the most, and just being able to just throw it perfectly. But should we move on to CJ Stroud?
Sure.
Yeah, so CJ Stroud, Ohio State. Yeah, what were obviously you're being a Michigan fan, you saw him quite a bit. But what were your impressions of Stroud?
Well, yeah, this guy is really good. He's they kind of ran Ohio State kind of ran a hurry up offense, and so they were running plays very fast. Some of his measurables are kind of classic for a quarterback. 6'2", 6'3". He's 215, maybe 220 or something like that
Yeah.
pounds. So those are a little better. He started, I think it was 25, 26 games again. And you talk about somebody who can deliver the ball accurately. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
but his receivers, wow.
Yeah,
Where do we start? With Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, the Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, Jackson Smith of Jigbu. Those guys are all first round. They had a tight end. They even had a tight end that's ranked pretty high. It's going to be drafted pretty high this year. But
Mecca Ibuka is another wide receiver they have.
Yeah. But again, every time I seen him, for the most part, the way Michigan shut him down was, contained him, I should say. I don't know if they really shut the guy down. They kind of contained him pass rush wise, and they were 2 years ago they knocked him around pretty good, and this year they just they were containing him, and he wasn't making very good throws. But his numbers, I mean, he only lost 4 games. He's playing Big Ten football, so again, you're in one of the best conferences in college football. So he's pretty good. I was pretty impressed. I was always every time I'd seen him play, I'd think he's going to take this team down the field and score, and they did. They had a lot of games where they blew out guys and stuff like that, other teams, and but
they definitely
he looks yeah, he started 24 games, sorry about that, and he had some pretty impressive numbers, and in 2021 he 4,500 yards. That's a lot of yards, man. 44 touchdowns. So
yeah, I think he's definitely he's going to be a good case study of how much the talent around you elevates your game, because those receivers are ridiculous. It's kind of like what Tua was throwing to at Alabama his couple years in Alabama. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be maybe a top 5, top 10 pick as of now. Obviously it's not until 2024, so things can change, but he's definitely very accurate. Maybe not as precise as Bryce Young, and again, just that leading receivers, maybe he can do a little bit better there. To me, doesn't he seems athletic, right? But it seems like he kind of plays slow, doesn't it? I'm not saying that necessarily in a negative way. It just feels like not as fast as when he gets running downfield, which he didn't do a lot, which doesn't mean he can't do it, but We saw it in that Georgia game, which everyone talks about, and this last season, maybe his best game ever, which is a great thing for him. That his last game he played in college was by far his best game. He ran a lot in that, but I don't know. It feels like in the pocket, he just kind of plays a little slow or doesn't play athletically, and I think that's a weakness that people talk about, and you talked about it with Michigan being able to shut him down with pressure. Is he has the feeling in the pocket is maybe not as good as it could be, which doesn't mean it can't improve. But
that game versus Georgia, they do. Most people do. The guy did himself. Stroud did himself a big favor.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ohio State should have won that game.
Yeah.
Field goal kicker missed the last second field goal, a makeable field goal. He had really good numbers, and so he was leading his team, to the promised land there, and unfortunately it didn't happen. So I have a team where I think he would fit marvelous in.
Well,
in the
we'll
NFL.
talk about. Yeah, let's talk about that at the end.
Okay.
Because I am interested in hearing that. But yeah, his arm strength is definitely a step above Bryce Young's. They're just different players. CJ Stroud is definitely a pocket. He can move. They do a lot of like the bootleg stuff with him. I noticed. Moving him to the right, rolling him to the right or left. But he's looking to throw. He's not looking to run or even like ad lib. He's not looking to ad lib a play and kind of cut back and Mahomes.
Yeah, like you said. Yeah, like you said, he's not. He may be, rolling out and stuff like that, but he doesn't look like he's a threat to run. Just kind of running like a Plastic Man or something like that. Or
But then when you see him, like when he decides to run, it's like, oh. He's kind of like, and actually I think PFF compares him to Tannehill a little bit, especially with that running where it's like, he's a little bit like, he doesn't look when he's in the pocket, but I guess when he gets going and gets running, it's like, oh yeah, like he actually is pretty athletic. And so it'll be interesting. And I think we do need to be careful with, again, Justin Fields, and you talked about this a lot. Like he never ran at Ohio State, and the guy just almost
not at all, man. I had no idea that guy was a runner. Yeah. He didn't really have to, though. I mean,
yeah. And I always talk about I always remember Melvin Gordon, how he like caught like 10 passes in his college career, and that was like a thing. Oh, can he catch passes? And then was one of the better pass catching, 50 passes every year. And it's just because that's not the offense wasn't built that way in Wisconsin, right? They would just run the ball. They didn't need to pass it to their running backs. And so just because they don't necessarily do it in college doesn't mean they can't. So I am interested in seeing Stroud overall. One before we move on, just one interesting stat. We talked about pressure rates. He was at 23, almost 23.5%. So almost 10% or over 10% less than Bryce Young and these other two guys we're going to talk about. But he was pressured by far the least amounts. And when he was pressured, his completion percentage dropped to 50%. And you compare that to Bryce Young, which was 70% when he was under pressure. So kind of interesting. Because you assume you're going to go to a not so great team and you're going to probably be under pressure a lot more than you were in college. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we'll move on to those are pretty much, I would say, the consensus top two as of now. Some people have Stroud 1, Young 2. It goes back and forth. The next two guys, Will Levis, we'll talk about next from Kentucky. A very interesting one. You see people saying he's the best quarterback in this draft, and then you see people saying he's a fringe first-round pick. So he's kind of all over the place. What did you think about Levis when you went and watched?
Well, I watched some video of him, and and you're watching the video and you go, wow, this guy looks pretty good, running the offense pretty well. He's a prototypical build of a quarterback, like 6'3", 230.
Mhm.
Then there's some plays. It's just like, what are you doing? There was
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed. I wasn't impressed with his accuracy,
Hmm.
and it was okay, you
Mhm.
know.
Inconsistent,
Um,
I'd say. Yeah.
and when you think of a big guy, I guess you think of a bigger arm. I guess I'm not sure if I seen the big arm there. So I mean,
Well, something to note in 2022, like they had a new offensive coordinator, and they did a lot of just like dinking and dunking. PFF had it where 25% of his throws were behind the line of scrimmage, which is a lot. That's a lot, like a quarter of your throws behind the line of scrimmage. So I think he does have a pretty big arm. It just wasn't necessarily on display a lot last year.
he threw. So he was considered a senior. So
Mhm.
he's been around college football for a few years. He started off at Penn State,
Yeah,
and he was 2 years at Penn State, and he wasn't starting or anything else, and he left
he
for
was more of a
Kentucky.
runner. He was more of a running guy at Penn State.
Yeah, and I think his sophomore year he had some he played a little bit, but then they Penn State still had the same quarterback for about the last 4 or 5 years. One of those COVID quarterbacks.
Yeah,
He'll be moving on. I forgot the guy's name, but so Levis transferred to Kentucky, and then then probably his best year was 2021. But
yeah.
the two main years he played, 21 and 22, he had a total of 23 interceptions. That's
Hmm.
a lot.
Yeah.
He had 13 one year and 10 another. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, and you saw it in the games. I it's funny because I kind of like I'm on the same page as you. I worked a couple Kentucky games, didn't watch it a whole lot. So it was good to actually like just watch 5, 6 games of him, and we always talk about like the eye test. We're not scouts or anything again, but you watch him, it just feels like an NFL quarterback. It feels like a quarterback, doesn't he? Like just from all the years of watching it, he feels like, wow, this guy is good. And then, like you said, there's some throws you're just like, man, some ugly interceptions, um,
Yeah.
inconsistency and can be inaccurate, or he does hold the ball a lot. He was under pressure almost 38% of his dropbacks, which is a huge number. But also, that was turned into a sack almost 27% of the time, which is
Wow, I'm looking at his 2022. He was sacked 37 times.
to double what Bryce Young was.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's not always just the offensive line. That could be the quarterback.
right.
It's hard to say. You have to go back and look at each one, and even then, it's hard to say whose fault it was. But yeah, he was sacked a lot. Obviously, had nowhere near the amount of talent that the other two guys, Stroud and Bryce Young. I think he had Wandale Robinson last year, was the only skill position player to be drafted last year from Kentucky. And then there's like two guys, a running back and a receiver. I don't know where they're projected to go, but I don't think they're projected very high. They're going to be late, day 3 picks. So it was really just him. But I think his arm is really, really good. And I think he can throw it not just deep, but like he attacks the middle of the field. And some of his passes are just tight windows, kind of an NFL throws, like they say, right? It's just like you got to make that pass over the middle, in a tight window. Those are the passes that like you want to see. It almost feels like the deep pass is like an easier pass than it is to hit, a slant across the middle through a tight window, right? So it's a good case of like, and I always hear this, and I try and tell people this is like, you're drafting them not for what they are necessarily, you're drafting them for what they could be, right? That's why they're being drafted. And like Josh Allen is a perfect example of like, no one drafted a Josh Allen for what he was at Wyoming. They drafted him for like, okay, they saw things in him and look at what he's become, right? A potential, MVP candidate each year. I'm not saying Levis is going to be that, but I agree with you. Like, you do see the path, right? You see the path of him being able to play in the NFL, which is why I think a lot of people are high on him.
Yeah, coaches got to do their thing, man. They got to coach these guys, and so he's not going to hit the ground, running like some all-star quarterbacks they've drafted, who look really good. But
yeah,
he's got quite a bit of experience. Like I said, he's a senior. He still only has about I had it written down about 2 years of starting.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I think that's relevant, that
I agree.
how many games these guys are playing and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, if you kind of you go through your list of top quarterbacks in the NFL, I'd say a majority of them were going to be at least 2-year starters in college, probably even more. Mahomes was 2.5 basically. Herbert.
how about
was,
Mitch Trubisky?
Yeah, on the opposite end was 1 year.
Yeah,
right?
like 12 or 13 or
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, Josh Allen, he had to have been 3 years at least, I would say. No, he was 2. Okay. So yeah, I mean, you want at least 2, that's for sure. And you want to see the improvement from year to year. But I don't know. Levis is intriguing for sure. He's a guy I want to watch more. He had a better completion percentage under pressure than Bryce Young, almost 73%, which is really, really good. But he does seem to hold the ball and maybe tries to do a little bit too much, maybe because of the lack of talent on the team. Who knows? But Kentucky was relevant this year. And that's something too, is like, you want to see, you always see these guys like, yeah, he's supposed to be an NFL quarterback. It's like, okay, well, why wasn't he better in college, right? Or why wasn't the team better? Not necessarily, that doesn't always translate, but you see a guy like Will Levis, quarterback of Kentucky, and Kentucky was a good team last year, mostly due to him.
Yeah. So again, the Southeastern Conference. So you're playing big boy teams. You're playing Tennessee, Georgia, and the Mississippi teams and stuff like that. So playing Florida, sure. And that all matters.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and the last guy we're looking at today, and another intriguing guy, is Anthony Richardson from Florida. Basically, I think everything you were talking about of like what you like to see in quarterbacks, he's not it, except for maybe the size. 1-year starter.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Time of year. Yeah, he is a big guy and probably has the biggest arm in this draft class. But what were your thoughts of Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, he's a diamond in the rough, so he ain't, if a NFL team drafts him, he's not playing the first year. I can't see this guy. His college numbers are kind of all over the map. He would he'd have a game versus Florida State and he was 9 for 27.
Yeah.
Then there's other games. His accuracy is not great.
No.
his arm strength is strong, but
Yeah.
you know, his percentage, his completion percentage is not great. It was only 53%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's got some wheels. He can move. He's big. He's like 230 pounds, like 6'3", 6'4". So
He's gonna light up
uh,
the combine, that's for sure.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure when the quarterbacks are doing their thing, if it's Saturday
It's
or what, but
Saturday.
yeah,
Yeah.
some
Oh,
more
he's gonna
people
light
can
it up
watch.
for sure.
Huh?
He'll light it up for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Go
again,
ahead.
that doesn't mean, you know, he stinks or he's gonna stink, but he surely I don't know. I can't think of a fit to an NFL team or anything like that. You know, so
It has to
he's
be
he started again. He started only 1 year, so he's young. He's younger. You know, um, he didn't really get sacked that many times. He did have over 650 yards of rushing.
yep.
So, but the Florida team, Florida University of Florida, they weren't that good. You know, not compared to what they normally would. I think they were like 7-6 or something like that. So they
Yeah.
yeah, so this guy is going to be a project. Whoever takes him, it'll be interesting to see who thinks, you know, who thinks they should take him. You know,
Yeah,
and
for sure. I agree. It will be interesting. And like we talked about, the NFL's changing and like people are seeing this guy and they're like, he can make huge plays with his arms and his legs. You know, he had like 4 touchdowns runs of over 60 yards, I think, last year, which is crazy. You know, almost 40% of his passing yards came from deep passes. And out of these 4 guys, the next highest was Stroud, and that he was under 30%. So he's just, you know, obviously has the arm, but yeah, that accuracy is just like it seems like nothing can ever get into a rhythm. So, but if you fall in the right situation and the right coach, a lot of times the NFL and football is just all about fit. You know, teams, guys fitting with the right teams, and that's all it really takes. And I wouldn't be surprised. Well, we'll get into that about where they're going to go. But yeah, just like you said, not a lot of experience, only 450 dropbacks in his college career. Is pretty bad in the pocket, I'd say. Doesn't get sacked much because he can move and get away. But I do like, and something I was impressed with was he is kind of always looking to throw the ball. It seems like even when he's running and scrambling, like he's still looking down the field. You know, he does run the ball a lot, and there's a lot of design runs for him. But when it's a called pass, he is trying to pass it. But yeah, huge guy, very, very, very inaccurate. But again, you said what, 53% was his completion percentage?
yeah,
Um,
53.8. That's
Josh Allen,
terrible.
his last year was 56 at Wyoming,
Wow.
right? And that was a big thing with Allen in the first couple of years is, you know, he's not accurate. And now something happened. So
You know,
it's so hard.
yeah, Matthew Stafford had accuracy issues in college. You know, at Georgia, even I think he was in the, you know, I think his last year he was at like a 57 or 58%. But
Yeah,
so it can change.
yeah, for
It
sure.
definitely accuracy. They say, you know, it has a lot to do with footwork and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
they, you know, they get these guys. They get advanced coaches. You know, a lot of them are receiving, you know, some advanced coaching and stuff right now. You know, quarterback gurus and stuff like that, and they're really working on these things with them. We'll see.
and
They
there's
said,
just
yeah, that's what happened with Josh Allen. You know, even some of the NFLers see these quarterback gurus in the off season to look to get better.
Yeah, and there's just so much in technology that's advanced. You see it a lot in baseball with pitchers and just like they can measure their arm angles and where their release points are and down to the 10th of a degree, and they can they can have that pitcher adjust it, and then they become lights out a pitcher because they adjusted their arm angle by a slight. And maybe the same thing's going on with football. It's like, all right, he has the tools, but we need to work on those little things. But we can do that because we can diagnose it now. So I don't know. It'll be very interesting. Okay, let's say about 10-15 minutes left. What's your order of these guys? You can do it maybe from you can do it from a dynasty point of view. You can do it from just a regular NFL point of view. They kind of go hand in hand, I would say, to a certain extent. But
Well,
what would you rank these guys?
Yeah, if you're a dynasty guy, and you have a 2-quarterback league like we play in, and you need to draft one of them. So if you got pick one, so for a dynasty fantasy pick, you gotta pick either Stroud or Bryce Young. I mean, no doubt. Or if you need a quarterback, of course there's other.
Yeah.
There's other the running backs and wide receivers maybe will but you gotta be building. You gotta be constantly building your team.
Yeah, for sure. So where would you rank these? What's your 1 through 4 with these 4 guys as of now? These are initial thoughts.
Yeah,
can change,
I think I like Stroud a little better than Bryce Young, and then I think Levis is not far behind. I think there's enough good stuff I've seen with Levis. Those other 2 guys were in the premium programs and with the big 5-star players and stuff like that. So not saying that it was easy or anything else, but Levis I think looks good, and Anthony Richardson, it's like, wow, I don't know, could he end up like Desmond Ritter or who's the other, Malik Willis?
Yeah,
I don't know.
A lot of people are pointing to Malik Willis, and I think they're different personally, but a lot of people are.
Yeah, I think they are different. I think so too, from just what I've seen. So that's what I think the 1, 2, 3, 4 is. So
Stroud, Levis, or Stroud.
No, Stroud, Young, and then Levis.
Okay.
And then
and then Anthony Richardson. I think as of now, I think I'm gonna go Bryce Young, Levis, Stroud, Richardson as my top 4 as of now. That could change, of course. And we always talked about draft capital, and where these guys are drafted makes a huge difference. So like, there's even rumors out there that Anthony Richardson could be the number 1 overall pick if he is taken number 1 overall. Does that change things for you personally? Would you say, maybe I should take him as my first quarterback off the board in a rookie dynasty draft? Or are you kind of sticking to, no, I think Stroud is better, or I think Bryce Young's better? Does it change if Richardson goes number 1 overall?
It might, because let's face it, Richardson, we gotta change our frame of mind when we're talking about fantasy, and this guy does run 650 yards and stuff like that. So, but he's not a very polished passer. So, is he going to get you? Is he going to get you a lot of fantasy points? Well, he could in the right situation. That's for sure. Could he be Justin Fields? He's not as polished of a passer like Justin Fields was.
Mhm.
Fields didn't really, there's a lot of people bagging on him about, his passing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the way you got to think with fantasy is who's going to get me the most points. And I
Yeah.
guess, you got to look at the teams these guys go to
Mhm.
also. Are they going to get a chance? Obviously, you know, some of the teams that need, the Texans and the Carolinas and the Raiders and I think I'm missing one. There's
Um, yeah, the Colts.
yeah, the Colts.
Mhm.
But they gotta, how they gonna fit in.
Yeah,
But
it's yeah, go ahead.
I can't see somebody drafting Anthony Richardson number one, but you never know. I guess
No, you
things
don't.
it's all gonna, we see all these mock drafts and stuff like that, and it's gonna change.
Yep.
It's gonna change. It changes slightly after the combine, and then somebody has a marvelous pro day, and it changes again. It's kind of funny how, it's like a political poll, who's popular today and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
definitely changes a lot. And I think it change my mindset from a dynasty rookie draft. If I see Anthony Richardson go number one overall, again, we talked about it earlier. It's like when it comes to quarterbacks, we really got to kind of trust the NFL that they know what they're talking about or doing. And so we got to trust where they get drafted. Um, Not saying they're going to necessarily work out, but there's a reason why he's going to be drafted number one if he is. And none of us, not casual, but none of us fantasy players, people who've never scouted before or anything, like none of us really know better than some of these guys necessarily. And kind of the same thing with Levis. It's like if someone takes him with a top 5 pick, we kind of have to respect that and not let him slide too far in a dynasty draft. So I think it would change it. I still think, me personally, I'm taking Bryce Young as the first quarterback no matter what. I know he's undersized, but NFL is different. I heard something today where they said, for wide receivers, different position, but for wide receivers, it used to be like if you were under 200 pounds, you did not pan out. Tavon Austin is the guy that comes to my mind, and just he was a good player,
yeah,
just never panned out to where he was drafted. And then this last year, I think it was only 2 of the top 10 fantasy receivers were over 200 pounds. It was like Devontae Adams and Jamar Chase or something. Um, and I think I heard that right. But it was, you have all these guys like Amaron St. Brown, and where it just doesn't make as much of a difference now. And I think kind of the
Devontae
same.
Smith.
Devontae Smith, is another one where it's just maybe it just doesn't matter as much. Like, so I'm taking him just because if you take out the weight and the height, he would be the consensus number one. If he was 6'2", 6'3", he might be the best quarterback prospect we've seen in 5 years or whenever they say that, So, but you mentioned Stroud, and there's someone you would enjoy for him to go to. Who was what team was that?
Yeah. Also, I have an idea for Levis too. So Stroud, if he ended up on the Colts, I think that
Very
would
possible.
be pretty good because the Colts, there's enough. There's enough team there that was good, a year ago and then went to shit, the running
Mhm.
game, if they had the running game, they get another wide receiver, the offensive line was supposedly good. They had a decent defense. So if Stroud went to the Colts, I think that would be a good fit.
Okay.
And Levis. So if Levis can end up in Carolina, because Carolina, they're assembling a bunch of old school coaches. Frank Reich, there's Jim Caldwell, and they've got a few other guys who have been around the block. So, not any of these new boy wonders or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's where I think those guys would fit.
Okay.
Anthony Richardson, man, I tell you, I seen a mock draft. It was Daniel Jeremiah. They had him going to the Lions at 18 because they have 2 number 1 draft picks. And at first I was like, yeah, let's get ready. And then I started looking at Anthony Richardson in video, and I'm going, man, they better not waste that 18th draft pick on this guy. I don't know. When I read things like, yeah, they'll get a package of plays for him, and stuff like that. I don't like that crap. Bringing a guy in for, run or 2 plays or something like that, and then he's back out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may seem all right or something, but
no, I think it's good to have your beliefs and what you believe in, and everyone is wrong all the time when it comes to football, and whether it's GMs of teams or casual fantasy football fans, we're wrong all the time. So it's like, make what you believe in, and this is what you think. And if you're wrong, of course you'll admit you're wrong, but you got to just kind of stick with your conviction. So yeah, if you don't like Richardson, then I can see why you wouldn't want him for your Lions. That's for sure.
Somebody's going to take him though.
Someone's going to take him very high, I think.
Yeah.
I think maybe definitely in the top 10 is my guess. Maybe even top 5. I think someone's going to take him.
I'd be. I'm glad I'm not on that team.
Yeah, but like you said, I think he needs to sit for a year, or at least half a season.
Yeah, a year. My word, he's like, yeah. But anyway, there's 2 other quarterbacks that don't get a lot of mention. One of them was a Tennessee quarterback. He got hurt late in the year. Hendon Hooker.
Yep.
And he's pretty good. I don't have his numbers, and I haven't looked at. I seen him play a couple times, and he looked pretty good. So, and also there's a Stanford quarterback.
Yeah, Tanner McKee. We're actually I think next week we're gonna look at 6 more quarterbacks for next week.
Okay.
Maybe not in as much detail because they're going to be second rounders, maybe first rounders, but Hooker and McKee are the next 2 in line, and then there's a few others that we're going to look at. The Purdue guy and the UCLA quarterback, and so yeah, we're going to look at 6 more that are kind of the consensus next 6 for next week. Yeah, that's it for today. I think we made it just under an hour. So like I said, we'll be back next week looking at the next 6 quarterbacks, and we're going to kind of do this every week, or maybe even twice a week if time permits, of kind of getting ready, looking at quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, tight ends, because when it comes to fantasy, those are the players that make a difference. So we will catch you guys next week with some more quarterbacks. See ya.